Hi everybody, it's Elizabeth Chance with Busy Living Sober and down at Penn with Dr. Henry Kranzler. It's good to see you. Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I would like for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I am an addiction psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry at Penn and director of the Center for Studies of Addiction. We are located at 3535 Market Street, and we are a center devoted to research on alcohol and drug dependence, risk, manifestations, and treatment.
How do you define addiction?
I personally think addiction is impaired control over substance use. It could be extended to non-substance addictions, gambling, etc. But I'm mostly interested in substance addiction, and it involves impaired control, so an incapacity to act in ways that are often self-damaging and that have consequences in one's life. And despite those consequences, an addicted individual continues to seek the substance and use it.
So if we were to even break that down to even more layman terms, what would you say an addict is really, like briefly, to someone who's out there and is really confused as to what addiction is? Because most people think an addict is the person that's in, walking the streets with just a bag, a bottle in the bag,
right,
and not somebody who's at a cocktail party, instead of being like somebody who's in a ball gown and all the rest of it.
So addiction, like many things, is not a yes-no phenomenon. It occurs on a continuum. I'm pretty much addicted to coffee. I mean, I drink coffee every day, and if I don't drink coffee, I get a headache. So I'm, in that sense, dependent on coffee. It doesn't adversely affect my life, so I don't consider it an addiction per se. But other substances tend to have a more significant impact, either on health, on family relations, and that's often an issue because the people we live with deal with us most frequently and under the most unusual circumstances all the time, 24 hours a day. And so I think family negative effects on family are a major consideration in defining addiction in terms of its impact.
Oh, I completely agree. How do you see addiction today in America?
Well, I'm a little concerned about the cannabis epidemic, if you will, because I think we already have enough things that people can use to harm themselves. I'm not morally opposed to it. It's really an issue of adding a drug to the lists that are available. Obviously, the opiate epidemic is the major and most significant threat, and alcohol continues to be a widely abused drug. Tobacco continues to be the single largest killer of any of the substances that people use. So I think that there's lots to be done. I think people may not be as aware of things, of the risks as they could be. And part of what we do is aim to help people increase their awareness. Yeah, it causes sensory changes that could interfere. Time and depth perception can be affected. Those can be very dangerous when driving, for example. So, I mean, it's not a totally harmless substance. It's certainly not what it used to be considered, which is the heinous weed with roots in hell. And that's a little extreme, but it's not wholly benign either. I think that people who use marijuana are maybe more inclined to use other drugs, but it doesn't inevitably lead to other drug use. I think tobacco is a gateway drug.
Oh,
if
really?
any. Yeah,
Really?
only if you define a gateway drug as the one that people use first before they go on to using other substances. Tobacco is probably the drug that's used earliest.
And do you think that there should be more of a Surgeon General warning on alcohol than there is today? That it could contribute to cancer?
Well, I don't know if you're aware of the Surgeon General's most recent report covers alcohol,
Right.
and other drugs. The first Surgeon General's report on smoking, which was in 1967, I believe, has led to a drop from about 50% of the adult population smoking to now about a third of that,
Wow.
which has enormous public health implications. And I'm hopeful that the most recent Surgeon General's report, which covered alcohol and other drugs other than tobacco, will have a similar beneficial effect.
That'd be wonderful. Save some lives, right?
Exactly.
We've had too many people dying. So, what do you believe needs to change in regards to the perception of addiction?
Well, I think people need to recognize, first of all, that it occurs on a continuum, and it's not all or nothing. Second of all, that it can be modified, that there are treatments that can be successful in changing behavior. Behavior is changeable. And that I think more resources need to be devoted to research on the addictions. If you look at the National Institutes of Health, for example,
Mm-hmm.
which supports most of the non-pharmaceutical company-sponsored research in this country, and is the largest such entity in the world. The largest institute in terms of funding is the National Cancer Institute. In fact, alcohol and smoking contribute a great deal to cancer, and NCI, in fairness, funds a lot of smoking research. But I think that there's an imbalance in terms of the public health impact of cancer, for example, or heart disease and addiction. I think there's much more attention given to cancer and heart disease, much more needs to be given to addiction. And in fact, it would have beneficial effects both on cancer and heart disease risk. So that's my own bias, and I obviously have an axe to grind here since I do addictions research.
So tell me what you're doing down here and how people can get in touch with you and where you are and what you guys are doing, because I think it's phenomenal, and I feel so honored to be able to be here with you because you guys are doing such big, amazing work that people don't really know
Thank
about.
you. Well, so our center does many different kinds of studies. In general, we do a lot of treatment studies. We treat opiate dependence, we treat alcohol dependence, we treat nicotine dependence, and we treat cocaine dependence. We also have studies looking at the genetic risk of these disorders, and we use neuroimaging, both magnetic resonance imaging and PET, positron emission tomography, to study the processes and the risk manifestations in the brain. We are doing studies of alcohol use disorder and are actually recruiting for people who want to stop or reduce their drinking by participating in a medication trial. And that number is, should people be interested in calling, 215-746-1987. That's 215-746-1987. And if people are interested in other aspects of what we do, they can call that number. I'll be happy to provide information. We're supported largely by the National Institutes of Health, and those are public funds, and we are very interested in giving back to the public whatever we can that's helpful.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. And does the person that you're looking for have to meet any certain criteria?
Well, generally for the alcohol studies, they have to be heavy drinkers.
Okay.
And they have to want to reduce or stop their drinking.
Wonderful. And will they get paid to do this, or will they?
There are nominal payments for
Okay.
some of the research evaluations, but the primary motivation needs to be wanting to change drinking behavior, or for smoking to quit smoking, or for cocaine, quit using cocaine.
But the one you're working on, right? Especially, you would love somebody that, if somebody has a problem with alcohol right now and wants to change that, this could be a resource for them as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And when you were talking about the imaging, you were talking about an MRI and PET scans, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So people, that's actually, they're looking at their brain.
Brain imaging, right.
And do you believe it's a genetic thing with addiction?
I think that a lot of the risk is genetic, and we are only scratching the surface of that. These are complex disorders, meaning there are probably 50 to 100 or 200 or more genes that contribute to the risk. So it's a complex puzzle that we're only beginning to understand.
Wow. Well, I'm very grateful for all you're doing.
Thank you.
And my last question is, do you believe that addicts, when sober, can have happy, healthy, and productive lives?
I absolutely believe it. I've seen it.
You have?
Many times. Believe me, I would not have done this for 30 years if I didn't think that it was something that could benefit people, and if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes.
And so, and with this shame that's out there today, that's still associated with addiction, other people have come out with different, mental disorders, but the addict is still the last one that wants to come out and say, oh my gosh, you can't call your next door neighbor Betty and say, oh my gosh, my son's battling heroin, because of that shame.
I think that's a very unfortunate. I think it's an impediment to people getting help. I think you read it time and time again in the newspaper about kids who have overdosed on opioids, for whom it's too late, unfortunately, and their parents are crushed by having not done something sooner. So I think shame is an unfortunate impediment to getting help.
So if we can change that with Busy Living Sober, that's what we're going to do.
It would be very helpful.
Well, thank you, Henry.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay, take care.
You too.